Hello everybody, and thank you for tuning into the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdam, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you.
How are you this morning?
Doing well. I'm getting prepared. The country's getting prepared. There's a very, very big trial coming up pretty soon. But it seems like some people don't seem to be interested, and they ought to be. It's a big deal.
Yeah.
The president's getting impeached.
Okay.
What's going to happen? Who's going to be the president? Oh, he's not the president, but he's going to be impeached of being the president. So, I don't know. It's in the Constitution. You're allowed to impeach a president. But I've been looking in Article 1, Section 8 and all this. I looked for the authority given to the Congress to impeach a president that's not a president, a former president. And I don't know how that works. And I understand there was a preliminary vote in the Senate as a point of order. I think I know the senator that did this. And they had this vote to take a position whether it was constitutional or not to do this. And actually, they didn't even get enough votes where they could even convict him. And, because it is. And the founders are at least smart enough to make it a 2/3 vote to convict somebody of the impeachment that the House might present, because they didn't want this thing to deteriorate into a political football, and it looks like it has, no matter how much they try. It doesn't look like it's real easy to pass in the Senate, and so it looks like there isn't any. But then why are the Democrats working so hard at this? I mean, they want to impeach him. It sounds political to me. I don't know if it ever do anything political in Washington, but it sounds political. There's going to be a vote. The trial is going to start on February 8th, I believe, and the length of the trial, who knows? We're going to talk about a suggestion that maybe somebody would consider, because my question is, what if they had a mock trial, and nobody came? The Democrats are going to come because there might be a little bit of demagoguing here and there, and the media will be there, and the people who might want to have a fairer hearing on social media. Trump can't even Twitter on this. You can't use Twitter on this. So people are just humbugged because they don't expect it to alter who's president right now, and there are some problems right now that people are concerned about that are much greater. But the question I ask is, I'd like our viewers to think about it, what would it be like if nobody showed? They had a mock trial, and nobody showed up. That is, of course, on one side of the issue. The Democrats would show up, but I think it'd be fascinating. I think it'd be a lot of fun. Where is he? Where is he? How can we yell and scream at him? But they'll figure out something to say. But I don't know if anybody would give that consideration. But of course, I think if they were, they should be on our program talking about it, because I'd like it to be a surprise. Just walk in. Where are they? Where are they? Come on in. Here's their table. Sit on here. And is the president going to attend? And this sort of thing. But no, it's out of control. That whole nonsense and this idea that Trump is the evil of all presidents ever, and we've made our criticisms for more than a year now, and no more than that, for 4 years.
Yeah.
When he was running, we pointed out his shortcomings, and that was, I think, legitimate. But right now, though, this is continuing, and there is a cult out there, and I think that Trump has a cult. He may have a little cultish supporters, but I think the real cult is that group that's anti-Trump, obsessed with anything anti-Trump, and I think it's driven by jealousy. Well, how can you be jealous of a guy like that? Because he's been successful, and he really was more successful in the last election than anybody else did. So he's been very successful, but the jealousy hasn't satisfied him. It became hateful. The status quo was challenged. the deep state was challenged, and the politics of Washington D.C. was challenged. So they really, really have a lot of, they despise him, but it's also a challenge to the power structure. So therefore they haven't quit, they're not going to quit, so they're going to go through this. Do you think the term is too strong to call this a mock trial?
A mock or a sham, or it's funny that every time, as you say, for the past 4 years, and then some we talk about it, every time we talk about Trump, we get two different kinds of comments. Why do you hate Trump so much? Why do you love Trump so much? So it always it seems like we're right, because no matter what we say, we always get hit with that. But I don't think Trump, unfortunately, is as capable of thinking outside the box as people like to think he is. If he really were thinking outside the box, I think his suggestion would be a good one. Don't even dignify it with your presence. It would infuriate. You're right. It would infuriate them because they want to have someone to yell at. If you just didn't show up, it would be really something to behold. And it already is becoming a farce. We saw the procedural vote that Senator Paul put to the floor last week, I think it was, where they were only able to peel away 5 Republican senators to vote that it's constitutional to impeach and remove from office somebody who's not in office, right? They needed, I think, 17 for the supermajority that's required by the Constitution. They didn't get that. We know it's going nowhere. But the other thing that's interesting about this whole thing, and Jonathan Turley had a piece about it on his website, but weeks have passed since the so-called insurrection, where, as you know, the rebels breached the ramparts and nearly took the government away and put King Trump back in office. What a farce. But weeks have passed, and yet the House has yet to hold one single hearing to bolster the case that they want to make, that there really was an insurrection. Why couldn't they bring witnesses talking about the insurrection? Why did they bring some evidence that maybe Trump delayed the National Guard from showing up? What did Trump do to contribute to aid and abet the so-called insurrection? You'd think that the House, with all of the Democrats are in control, they could have hearing after hearing, witness after witness, bolstering the case. They haven't held a single hearing. In fact, the House bringing of the articles of impeachment was a farce. There were no witnesses. There was no case made, and they basically handed the Senate, essentially an empty shell of an impeachment charge. So it's really an interesting time.
Yeah, and maybe the fact is, at the trial, maybe they would be embarrassed enough that they would have to have a representative to represent Trump, where you could ask them questions too. They don't want to answer the question. They don't want to really discuss it. But if the Republicans were there, maybe they would get a chance to express themselves, and this is a good way to avoid it. So I don't think it's an accident that they're having. You can't call this a fake. We know it's. We know what fake really is. It's like a mock trial. It just has no significant meaning, but it has a significance to it. And not just this week, and not media in Washington, but there's a political significance to this, because there are some people that say that Trump, they'll find a poll that shows that Trump is not only as high as he was before this mess came, but his numbers are holding up, because his supporters are usually pretty loyal. But it's hard to figure, because there's not a media out there that sort of reports objectively about what's going on. So we'll have to wait and see if they take our advice. But I just don't think that anybody can expect that this trial is worth the time and effort. And you know what? Subconsciously, I almost think there's some Democrats that just wish it would go away. because the absurdities of all this, the Republicans can't work on the assumption that all Democrats agree with Nancy Pelosi. I think there's quite a few out there that are common sense and won't buy into that. So I think that they might not say much about it, but they can get fed up with it, and they will break ranks with it. So therefore, and that's what Trump has been good at. In 2016, he was was able to get people who didn't strongly identify with a political party.
Yeah.
He got a lot of the Republicans, he got a lot of the independents, but he got some of the Democrats who were sick and tired of the whole mess.
Yeah.
And right now, I can't help but think that some of the presentations by the president right now comes up short. You know, they make fun of it, of Biden and his ability to read his lines, but there's going to be some people that say, you know, what is going on. But it's not easy for a totally independent person, because what if you're on the side of the Republicans and say, well, what we really need to do if we have the votes, if Biden really bombs, and even the Democrats give him, oh boy, we can impeach this guy pretty easy.
Yeah.
What good is that going to do right now?
Yeah.
You know, Harris is going to save the day for us.
Yeah. You mentioned the people that crossed over to vote for Trump. You can add, as you say, the Rust Belt Democrats, who lost their jobs, blue-collar jobs. What's the first thing Biden does when he's president? Cancels the Keystone Pipeline. He's going to adopt this Green Deal that's going to cause a lot of jobs. So those are Trump supporters. But, Turley is no Trump supporter. He was deeply critical of Trump's speech. He was critical of questioning the election. Very, very, very critical of Trump. But he points out in a couple of his columns about this that really, and we actually used the word backfire, I think, last week. But this could actually help Trump. The hapless Democrats are so desperate and so focused on this one man, to destroy this one man and erase him from history, they may actually end up helping him. What if there is a Senate trial and he's acquitted? He can say, hey, look, they keep going after me and I keep getting acquitted. It just plays into his narrative that his people just eat up. They lap it up and they love it. Or what if they pull it and say, okay, well, we're not going to do this because the case is basically falling apart. It will help us. Whatever they do, it may actually end up helping Trump in the long run.
This principle of canceling somebody, the cancel culture, that's rather new. I looked up on the internet to try to get a feel for this. I thought, well, maybe that's something they've done for years, and they've talked. But the message I got was, it was just recent. It's this past year, and I keep thinking, that's what they're trying to do with Trump.
Yeah.
They want to cancel him. Blackball him, so he never gets a job. He can't ever run for office again. This sort of thing. So they think they're going to cancel. Don't allow him on the internet. And they're doing all these things to it. But it'd be real interesting. Of course, there is a natural tendency for a lot of people, including myself, that sometimes it's pretty neat to cheer for the underdog.
Yeah, people like that.
I love sports, and I only watch the highlights, but I always ask, who's the underdog?
Yeah.
And if it's the end of the game, I want to, I like to see the underdog come through.
Yeah.
So Trump is obviously the underdog, and they're trying to cancel him. So there will be some sympathy out for them, and it may get a lot different as the months go along.
It might, and so the issue about the impeachment, you can't impeach him and remove him from office because he's not in office. That's clear. So they really don't want to remove him from office that he's not in. So it becomes pretty obvious that what they are so desperate to do is part of the constitutional process, the secondary part, which is barring him from ever holding office again. So since they can't remove him from office, that's what they're all banking on. And I keep wondering, with this obsession of preventing him, congressionally preventing him from holding office again, what are they afraid of? Why are they so desperate to prevent him from even being able to run again? What are they afraid of? He's so unpopular. He's so bad. Obviously, the American people wouldn't vote for him. It's just like how they were frantically opposed to investigating claims about vote fraud. What's the big deal? Why not investigate it? If I'm Biden, I want to have a full investigation and say, hey, look, I won fair and square. But they were desperately afraid of having any kind of investigation. They're desperately afraid of ever allowing Trump to run again. And you just have to wonder, maybe there's just no there there.
I think it has to do with political correctness. That's been around a lot longer than the cancel culture. It's been around, and political correctness has driven some independents, Democrats, Republicans, and all a little bit nuts. It just goes going to such an extreme when it comes to males being able to run races and girls attract me. So all this stuff. And if you don't do it, you're some type of a very bad person if you challenge political correctness. I've not had, matter of fact, I've only had one conversation with the president, and that was by phone. And I told him, I said, I think one of the reasons why you did well is you came down hard on political correctness, and people are just sick and tired of it. Now, if your whole motivation to get your power and raise money and appeal to all the segments, it would be political correctness. So you could have correctness for this group, correctness for this group, and this one. So I think what he has done is sort of undermine the credibility of these individuals obsessed with political correctness, and it drives them nuts. And Trump, it just stirs them up. It stirs them up and encourages them to do more. So that I think that will change. The conditions are changing now. He's not in office, and they're still worried about him, and it's pretty amazing. It's an amazing political phenomenon.
It really is. But they seem also to just be. They want to use the word insurrection. He incited an insurrection, and surely many others have said this. There's really nothing in his words. When he said, "Go fight like heck for your country," politicians, that's sort of stump speech stuff. They always say, "Hey, go fight for our side," and it's he's on tape saying you must be peaceful and patriotic. When you go there, he condemned the violence and lawlessness and mayhem after the event. So the idea that he's out there inciting, and actually I saw this, you probably saw this too, that the so-called pipe bombs that were put by the DNC headquarters, they were the night before, so they couldn't have been inspired by his speech. And they're also saying the case against Trump is being weakened because it's more and more that some of the stuff was planned beforehand. And I don't know if you saw, but I saw someone put it up on Twitter, really compelling video of an average Joe. He's up there at the Capitol at the entrance. He's yelling at a group of Capitol Hill police officers as behind him they're trying to break in, and they're being very lawless and mayhem causing. He's screaming at them, "Why are you just standing there? Why don't you call for backup? What's going on? Look what they're doing. They're trashing the people's house." It's really amazing, and the cops are just standing there doing nothing. Maybe there's a good explanation for it. We don't know, but the guy clearly has a kind of reaction that probably we would have if we were there. Why don't you stop these guys? Look what they're doing.
This whole argument that Trump stirred up this insurrection, the Republicans have responded, but you have to search for it. It has to be on one of the conservative channels or on the internet. But people have brought together some statements made by Democratic leaders.
Oh yeah, Senator Paul did that. Yeah.
Oh, and they're astounding on how vicious they were. And you have to look at their pictures, because I think the pictures are so telling, because it's anger and hatred like you've never seen before. And yet, I think the one part that in Trump's speech and his message to the people, they were very soft, though, and peacefully, peacefully demonstrate or something like that. But it had nothing to do with, go out there. What was the word they used? Force
Well, Maxine Waters in that one clip said, "Go get it. If you see any Republicans or anyone from the administration, go and bother them in a restaurant. Get in their face." Things like this.
Well, yeah. So you see people. Well, obviously, though, the mainstream media is still very, very powerful, and now that same group have a lot to say on what's going to come across social media, and that's pretty powerful. So it's a real struggle, but truth wins out in the end. Ideas have consequences.
They do. But as this kind of farce is unraveling, and I think it is unraveling, I think you're right. There probably are some nervous senators that are thinking, "I do not want to go along with this. I hate the guy, that's a given, but this is going to be a political liability to me." I think they're desperately searching for an exit strategy. A lot of them are. And Senator from Virginia, Tim Kaine, who could have been the vice president if Putin hadn't helped Trump win in 2016, right? Tim Kaine has put in a censure motion. I think they hope that they can do that, but the problem is they don't want to just condemn him. What they really are desperate to do is to bar him from holding office. For some reason, they're terrified of him holding office again. So, and Jonathan Turley, again, we keep bringing him up because that's some great work on this. He writes writes about the Kaine censure resolution. And the problem is that it contains language from the 14th Amendment that bars people from office if they, quote, have engaged in insurrection or rebellion or given aid and comfort to the enemies thereof. So what they're trying,
He had to commit treason.
Yeah, commit treason. So what they're trying to do is get around this problem of supermajority and be able to get around the Constitution and bar him from office forever with a simple majority. And the difficult part of that is they have to the findings of Kaine's resolution are that there was an insurrection, which I think that's very debatable. We've seen coups in other countries, and it's not the guy in a buffalo hat, running around. Too, and that Trump gave aid and comfort to the people doing it. There really isn't any evidence for that. But of that Turley points out, this is a dangerous precedent because if the party in power can bar a person or groups of people from even running for office in the future, that puts us in a situation like, for everyone loves to condemn Iran's democratic process, but they do have a council of religious elders who can bar people from running for office. That's essentially what we're going to have here. What if the Republicans get the majority back and they say, okay, we're going to bar this guy, the ones that have the best chance of winning.
Did you vote? Who'd you vote for last time? Oh, you voted for Trump. You're in trouble.
Yeah. So there's a real danger there that we're really descending into a real kind of banana republic.
I wanted to move on to back to medicine and wearing masks.
Yes.
If you're ready to do that. No, we've talked about the mask a lot. There's some downside to it for sure. And of course, the whole lockdown has been a big problem medically. A lot of kids suffer from it. Suicide rates are up. The emotions are riding high. But I want to concentrate just on the mask and what they've done, because people have started to identify some things precisely and giving them new diagnosis. The article that I want to start with comes from somebody by the name of Philip Schneider. And his article is long-term mask use may contribute to advanced stage cancer study finding. And it's not it's important, but it's not the final word. May contribute. That doesn't say it has. And study finds, and it's pretty well written about what they put this, how they identify it. And it comes from the New York University study, and this basically says that the mask will change the flora in our mouths and our breathing, because they don't put a mask on and then clean it. The mask, I could imagine if you just went out there and gathered up 100 masks and took them to the lab and culture everything into this mask, maybe people would quit using them. But anyway, the mask alters the bacteria flora within the lung, and if that happens, then it seems to make a bigger complication for advanced stage lung cancer. It's just another problem to deal with, and of course we've argued that could happen to even people without cancer. Anybody has asthma, something like that. Why would you cover their face and nose and mouth? It's totally foolish, and I'm sure there's going to be more on this, but I think it's much broader than that. I think it's going to take time. It's not going to all be known here in the next 6 months or so, but I think we're going to have more problems like this.
Yeah, I think that's the very last clip. And this isn't just this guy writing out of thin air. He's referring to a study that was published in the medical journal Chemical Discovery that looked at the microbes living, going into your lungs from using masks and breathing. And they also were studying advanced lung cancer in adults, and they found that adults with, I think, late-stage lung cancer, they seem to have these microbes in very much higher content in their lungs, and they're relating it to the possibility of these masks bringing those into the lungs and causing problems for people that have that. So again, may contribute to, may do, but it is interesting, and I think, as you say, we haven't even begun to see the ramifications of things like the masks. We now know the ramifications of lockdowns, as you say, suicide
have to be prepared. The mask is huge. It's not going to be solved quickly because, you know, Hedge mentioned the mask today along the lines that we're talking about, you know, the flip-flopping of Fauci and the using of multiple masks, this sort of thing. And he said it's, you know, 2 or 3 times that Fauci changed the position. But, and he quoted Fauci as saying, you know, we have to, even though some days he says you don't need them and they don't mean anything, but now he's on the position, everybody will wear them until everybody is vaccinated. So that may be a time because what if people do turn negative on vaccinations? And right now, some of the health workers are turning negative and they're on the front lines. So that's going to be a long time if they wait that long. And he's not for limiting this or giving people a little bit more freedom. And yet at the same time, he never claims consistently that we have evidence. It is very important. He doesn't show us a chart on, look, they put the mask on here and look, they crash and there are more diseases. Anyway. So, but there are other diseases that come up. There's one that I haven't seen his name. It's called maskne, and that is acne around the mouth. And it's what it does is just because ruining the circulation. Anything in our body has to have circulation. When it doesn't, you're in trouble. If you don't have good circulation in your heart, you know what happens, and this sort of thing. So, and this means the circulation and the flow around the mouth is not good. And besides, you know, the facial, the face is not washed as much. It just keep the mask on all the time, and they call that maskne. And it comes, and they know what it comes from, clogged pores. And, you know, it's sort of like the problem of acne, and that would be a different cause, but this just aggravates that. So you wonder about the treatment. Wouldn't be too difficult. Get rid of the mask and let people wash their face more often. You know?
That would work. Well, I guess I'm fighting to it.
Well, I want to do one more, okay. But this is close to the acne.
Similar, yeah.
And this has to do.
Put it down first.
So this one had to do with the dermatologist. Deal with that usually because it's just outside the mouth. But the dentists have to put up. They call it mask mouth, and because the bacteria in the mouth changes, there's more gingivitis, and more tooth decay. And they claim, there's somebody's put a study out that said there's a 50% increase of dealing with gingivitis and tooth decay, and that remains to be seen as just how serious it is. But I think people who know a little bit about masks would say, I'm not surprised. So I would like to get more dentists speaking out and saying, you know, it seems so crazy going to the dentist. Are you, well, do I have to wear my mask to your dentist? Yes. You can't come in unless you have a mask and you're going to the dentist on it. And how about going to the pulmonologist? You have a pulmonary disease. Yes, you can't come unless you're inhibiting your breathing with a mask. But anyway, I think I'm about finished there. And let's have you close and see.
Yeah, I'm sure they'll probably have a fact check to say that's not true.
Yeah.
Find something of any content. Now, I was just going to close by something that you talked about fairly often, which is obviously fact checkers are out there with their own agendas, but we do want to be able to keep in touch in case something happens, or if we decide to do something different, or if we're going to another platform, which we could adopt some other platforms. I think our show is on Library now, it's on several other BitChute and other places, so, but we want to be able to keep in touch. I'm going to put the link in the description, but just go to ronpaulinstitute.org and sign up for updates. We don't bother you, we don't send out stuff all the time. I hate getting all that stuff in email. Only when there's something important, we send you Dr. Paul's columns. You're the first ones to get them, and updates about the Institute. It's free, we'll never share your name, we'll never give it away, we'll never sell it. It's just a way to keep in touch. So I'll put a link in the description if you want to sign up. Well, we've got thousands of new sign-ups since I started announcing this, so that's really encouraging. Several thousand new sign-ups, and we have almost 300,000 subscribers to our YouTube channel. If every one of them signed up, we could really keep in touch and really get a movement going.
Well, they know we're thinking about the future, and we will survive no matter what happens, and they know that they've that Facebook already has had a minor attack, you know. So, but I wouldn't mind hearing, but I don't know how we can do this, you know, efficiently enough. If I had, I'd sort of like to know, maybe they can blog it or something. Some of them do it for suggestions on where what their